On this Friday night, a devastating discovery in BC. A graveyard full of hundreds of children at a former residential school.
They're as little as, potentially 3 years old.
The investigation underway. A convicted sex offender involved with a youth basketball camp for decades.
He made it clear that he wanted sexual favors.
A Global News exclusive. New calls to loosen rules for international travelers. Why some experts feel it's time to check out of hotel quarantine. From getting a shot to hitting the jackpot.
I still can't believe it.
The first winners of some major pandemic prizes.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Farah Nasser.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. We begin tonight with the horrific discovery of a suspected burial site for children, some as young as 3, at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School in British Columbia. The remains of what's believed to be 215 children were found in unmarked graves. Thousands of Indigenous children died of abuse and neglect after being forced to attend residential schools across Canada. Today, a moment of silence was held in the House of Commons. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the discovery is heartbreaking, tweeting today, "It is a painful reminder of that dark and shameful chapter in our country's history." The National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, Perry Bellegarde, also tweeted saying, "It's always crushing to have that chapter's wounds exposed." Paul Johnson is in Kamloops, where an investigation is now underway. Paul.
Farah, there's a portion of their property near the banks of the South Thompson River that they've got closed off. That's where the suspected mass grave site is. If this turns out to be what they think it is, this is going to be a staggering and heartbreaking moment in Canadian history.
The Kamloops Residential School was run by the Catholic Church. It operated from 1890 until 1977. Among the First Nations children from across BC's interior who were forcibly brought here, there were rumors of deaths and burials in unmarked graves. Now, the Kamloops First Nation says they've found proof.
We do know that they've had members who shared the stories of, cousins and relations and siblings who have been missing. And, the common theme that they've all heard was that their sibling, their sister, their brother, their consultant had run away. With that find, we know that these children did not run away.
Kamloops Chief Roseanne Casimir says a search of the school property with ground-penetrating radar has revealed the presence of at least 215 bodies. From the imagery obtained, they suspect many are small children.
It was very horrifying to learn that we've found 215, remains of children, within our grounds. We were going through grief and loss here, knowing that these were children.
Who were the children? How did they die? What were their stories? All of that is unknown at this point. But the stunning news has already touched the greater Kamloops First Nation community. Many of whom gathered at a site near the school Friday to share their grief.
This is a piece of history that is a devastating injustice to our people.
Gerald Etienne was a student at the school for 5 years. He also heard the chilling rumors.
There's a story of another gravesite beside the gym over here in that parking lot. There's supposed to be there were stories of grave sites there. I don't know how many, but those kind of things were told and came to my ears.
Now they wait for confirmation, uncertain how they'll face it and how all of Canada will.
The chief is telling us they plan to have an initial report out here in a matter of just a few weeks. In the meantime, they're in the process of reaching out to the RCMP and the BC Coroner Service. Farah?
Paul Johnson in Kamloops, British Columbia. Thank you, Paul. A Global News investigation has revealed some unsettling information involving a youth basketball school in Saskatchewan. Over the span of a year, it examined how convicted sex offender Dennis Hall was involved in the Young Athlete Saskatchewan program for decades, even after he was sentenced. As Nathaniel Dove explains in this exclusive report, it's now raising new questions around child safety at sports camps.
Kind of got awkwardly close to me and said, like, of course, if you and your girlfriends move in here, like cleaning wouldn't be the only thing I would get you to do to repay me.
Sylvia was 18 and working at her boss's home office in 2002 when she says he propositioned her. Global News agreed not to use her real name.
He made it clear that he wanted sexual favors and for payment for rent to stay there rent-free.
Sylvia eventually reported him to police, who said there was nothing that would lead to an investigation or charges. She told Global News she met the man at a basketball camp in Saskatoon. Dennis Robert Hall appears to have been involved with it since 1983. In 1981, a judge convicted Hall for 2 counts of having sex with girls between the ages of 14 and 16 and 2 counts of indecent assault against 2 other adolescent girls. According to news coverage at the time, all 4 played for a church basketball team, which he started coaching in the 1970s. Global News spoke to one of the survivors.
It started off very, innocently, hugging you, and then, you're upset and you're crying and, and then, giving you a kiss on the forehead like your father would.
Multiple media outlets have previously reported Hall received a pardon in 1994. In Saskatchewan, there are no regulations prohibiting anyone convicted of committing sexual offenses against minors from being involved with a private sports camp. An email from a camp account to a parent stated Hall hasn't been involved in years. No one from the camp responded to Global's inquiries, but photos on the website from 2011 to last year appear to show Hall was there. Global News contacted Hall several times for this story, even questioning him in person.
You ever offered your place to stay for a worker if they stay the night with you?
He did not respond to any requests for comment. In a statement, the Saskatchewan government said it has not been made aware of issues that would require provincial regulation of sports camps. The federal government said abuse has no place in sports, that it's working to implement a universal code of conduct, but provincial bodies regulate summer camps. A legal expert says some governments and organizations have improved how they protect children over the past 40 years, but Monique Saint-Germain says children are still not safe.
It would be nice to see national standards across the board for things like the protection of children.
Nathaniel Dove, Global News, Saskatoon.
In part 2 of our special investigation, Global News obtains a police report detailing allegations against the man involved with that sports camp. How police handled the case tomorrow on Global National. Now to the COVID-19 pandemic. New federal modeling shows much of the country is making steady progress in controlling the 3rd wave. Yet Dr. Theresa Tam is warning many more Canadians must be vaccinated to safely ease restrictions.
Our efforts have got us well and truly over the peak of the 3rd wave nationally and heading for a much better summer if we can stay the course. Now is not the time to relax our measures.
Tam says at least 75% of Canadians 12 and older need their first dose and 20% need their second to safely begin easing restrictions. Federal numbers show there is progress in all age groups, but there is still a ways to go. As of tonight, 54% of Canadians have had at least 1 dose and 4.8% have been fully vaccinated. Ontario's become the latest province to speed up appointments for second doses. The province says people 80 and up can start booking their second shots next week. Depending on supply, the wait for some people may be much less than 16 weeks.
Everyone in Ontario who wants a vaccine could be fully vaccinated by the end of August. That's right, friends. Ontario is ready to deliver a 2-dose summer.
And with vaccination rates climbing, calls are growing to loosen rules on travel. A new report by a group of Canadian experts says fully vaccinated travelers who test negative should not have to quarantine. It also recommends scrapping the mandatory hotel quarantine for air travelers. Abigail Bimman explains why and how the government is responding.
I don't travel for holidays. I don't travel for vacation. I travel because I need to work and provide for my family.
As a pro-tennis official working around the globe, Damiano Torella is not exempt from quarantine when he comes home. The cost of a quarantine hotel means he needs to choose between not working or a lengthy time away from his wife and young children. He welcomes the new report calling on the government to scrap the hotel program, citing a variety of problems.
I think it would be finally something based on common sense and science, and not just politics.
We do not have evidence that shows that we have actually reduced the transmission of the virus through the quarantine hotels. And remember, the quarantine period for those hotels is only 3 days, which is inconsistent with the science around the incubation period.
The advisory panel also suggests looser quarantine rules overall instead of 2 weeks. For people who aren't vaccinated, it recommends a test on day 7 and an end to quarantine whenever a negative result comes back. People with 1 dose would only need to quarantine until a test taken on arrival day comes back negative. And for those fully vaccinated, the panel recommends no quarantine unless a test taken at arrival comes back positive.
It is quite a complex space and needs thoughtful consideration.
The move is welcomed by airline and travel industries and Canadians like Melinda Schneider, separated from her boyfriend in Denmark while both attend school.
I understood being very, very, very restrictive and very protected when they didn't know how to treat it, when there was no preventative anything, but we know so much more now.
But the premier of the country's biggest province again called on the prime minister for more border protections.
This could cause a fourth wave if we don't tighten up the borders.
Friday, the UK Prime Minister confirmed Justin Trudeau plans to attend the next G7 summit in person. It's in 2 weeks. It would be Trudeau's first foreign trip since before the pandemic, and there's no word yet as to whether the Canadian government plans to drop the quarantine requirement before he returns. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
The Canadian Armed Forces has deployed resources to Manitoba to help the province through its brutal third wave. A specially equipped Hercules aircraft is now in Winnipeg to help transport critically ill COVID-19 patients out of province for care. According to the military, the aircraft can carry 2 patients at a time. As of tonight, 27 Manitobans are being treated out of province. 1 is in Saskatchewan and the rest are in Ontario. Nova Scotia is emerging from its biggest COVID-19 surge with its reopening plan. Restrictions will ease in 5 phases starting next week based on data, not dates.
We can move through the phases, hopefully every 2 to 4 weeks. If we're hitting our vaccine targets and our epi is fine, we should be able to move through things in 2-week phases.
And some of Canada's top athletes got their second dose today. Members of the Canadian Olympic and Paralympic teams were able to get their second Pfizer shot at a special clinic in Toronto. The Canadian Olympic Committee is aiming to get everyone fully vaccinated ahead of the Tokyo Games in July.
It's a nice relief to know that, kind of doing our part, especially if Japan happens and we're going, that we're not putting them at risk when we head over and we have a bit of extra safety as well.
If Japan's Olympics will happen is what many people are wondering. The country is extending its state of emergency in Tokyo and other areas for 20 more days because infection rates are still not slowing down. Today, the president of the Tokyo Olympic Organizing Committee hinted even local fans may be barred from venues when the games do open on July 23rd. It's the mission to reduce carbon emissions. Coming up, how big oil is undergoing a big change to be more eco-friendly. A significant shift is underway in the oil and gas sector. After more than 7 decades, the Canadian Association of Oil Well Drilling Contractors has changed its name. It's now known as the Canadian Association of Energy Contractors. The new name comes with a new mandate, developing greener energy. Around the world, companies are being forced to revamp to address the global climate crisis. As Eric Sorensen reports, the energy evolution is beginning to look like a revolution.
In the Netherlands, climate advocates celebrate after oil giant Royal Dutch Shell was ordered to cut carbon emissions almost in half by 2030. Shell is appealing, but the decision by a Dutch court could pave the way for similar cases worldwide.
This is a groundbreaking verdict as far as I'm concerned. Royal Dutch Shell is ordered by the court to do its share in avoiding dangerous climate change.
A growing surge in climate awareness saw several head-spinning changes at major oil companies this week. Exxon lost 2 seats on its board to activist investors who want the company to do more to address global warming. And a shareholder rebellion at Chevron voted to force that company to cut its carbon emissions. Pressure to change is coming from both outside and inside big oil.
There are people that really want to see this fundamental change, and it's getting right into the boardroom, and that means that we're going to start to see these companies responding and making some of these tough decisions.
In Canada, there are growing challenges attracting investments in the Western oil patch. One academic says companies, more than governments, see the need to become more nimble.
It's no surprise to them, but it's a surprise to our political leaders in Alberta and Saskatchewan. They have placed all their bets on the fossil fuel industry.
But governments, too, could see their hands forced.
The court is satisfied that a duty of care should be recognised.
An Australian court judgment from a lawsuit brought by a group of teenagers ruled the government has a duty to protect future generations from climate change, in this case when it comes to expanding coal production.
This case was about young people stepping up and demanding more from the adults whose actions are determining our future well-being.
More evidence Friday that big oil companies get it. French oil and gas giant Total announced a rebranded image.
Se transforme et devient Total Énergie.
The future will see Total become a multi-energy enterprise, what the CEO calls a green energy company.
Une majeure de l'énergie verte.
Grassroots climate advocates say genuine change will come not just when oil companies diversify, but when they stop investing in new oil and gas projects. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
The oil and gas sector is at a crossroads, still ahead, the path to decarbonization here. As countries work to decarbonize, Canada has been slowed by an economy deeply grounded in oil and gas. Yet this country is quietly becoming a leader in technology that could be indispensable in bridging that gap. I spoke with Derek Evans. He's the president and CEO of Meg Energy, a leading oil company that's setting an ambitious goal of net zero based on the prospect of carbon capture. The oil and gas sector is at a crossroads, and for Derek Evans, the way out is through decarbonization.
So to me, it's a natural step in the evolution of the oil and gas business.
Like Canada itself, Meg Energy aims to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. For Evans, the only realistic path includes carbon capture.
It's the single biggest lever that we have to pull to actually start to decarbonize. This is a technology that exists today. This is one that we could put in the field.
In one sense, carbon capture is the most direct solution to the emissions problem. Simply return the carbon to the earth. As fossil fuels are burned, instead of being released into the air, the CO2 is chemically isolated and captured, then compressed and sent via pipeline to a location to be stored underground. Globally, there are more than 24 such facilities, but Canada is home to some of the largest and most advanced, including the Boundary Dam in Saskatchewan, the Quest facility near Edmonton, and the Alberta Carbon Trunk Line. And it's near Christina Lake, Alberta, where Meg Energy hopes to erase most of its own emissions. The biggest barrier for Evans? The endless political fighting over the carbon tax, a clear price on emissions that incentivizes future planning.
For anybody to undertake a carbon capture and storage project, they're going to want to know that there is going to be a contractually set price of carbon that they can take to the bank and say, look, we want to build this project. That sort of uncertainty has been a big problem for people in the business that wanted to move forward on carbon capture and storage.
And while critics point to its high cost and long timelines, the federal budget introduced a corporate tax credit for carbon capture. It's just a fraction of the $30 billion in funding that Alberta is asking Ottawa for in the coming years. Do you think that there's a real shift when it comes to the oil and gas sector in Alberta?
Oh, there's a palpable shift. The urgency to get after doing more on the carbon file has definitely increased. You're seeing large portions of the oil and gas sector saying this is something we need to turn our attention to, and we need to agitate and get in front of government and say this is how we can achieve your Paris Accord goals.
Was there something specific that changed your view on this?
I'd say the specific piece was frustration. It was frustration that we have continued to talk about this, and our children are going to hang us up by the thumbs for our lack of action on this file. We need to chart that path forward, and we need to chart it in an aggressive fashion.
Carbon capture is no magic bullet, but in the long road to net zero, it's becoming harder to see a way forward without it. $1 million immunity. Next, the 22-year-old who got vaccinated and got rich. Imagine if you could win $1 million just for getting your COVID-19 shot. Well, that's the big prize the state of Ohio offered people as an incentive to get vaccinated. This was Abigail Bimman's reaction when the governor told her she was the state's first lucky winner.
I was completely surprised when I got the call, and I still can't believe it. I'm definitely not quitting my job.
The 22-year-old is a mechanical engineer working on her master's degree, and although she's very excited, she's trying to stay grounded, planning to use some of her winnings to buy a used car, invest, and as she mentioned, keep her job.
I know what some schools I might want to go to, like Miami University.
And that's Joseph Costello. He's talking about his college goals. The 14-year-old won a 4-year scholarship as part of the lottery. 4 more drawings will be held in the coming weeks. And as a side note, Joseph's mom said she was always going to give her kids the vaccine, but the lottery there, the scholarship lottery, certainly accelerated the timeline. That's Global National for this Friday night. I'm Farah Nasser. Tonight's Your Canada is the National Art Gallery in Ottawa during this month's Tulip Festival. We love seeing Your Canada, so please keep sending us your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. Robin Gill is going to be with you tomorrow. Until Friday, take care of yourselves and each other.